Right now on Morning News Now, political split screen. President Trump's long-promised immigration crackdown begins as the White House faces a major setback in court. A federal judge blocking Mr. Trump's order to end birthright citizenship, calling it blatantly unconstitutional. But the judge says he has never seen a case like this in his 40-plus years on the bench. Plus, declassified. After decades of speculation, the public could soon gain access to secret files on the assassinations of JFK, RFK, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But we've learned about a new batch of executive orders signed by the new president. Also this morning, gaining ground. Weary firefighters say they are finally gaining control over those deadly Southern California wildfires. But this morning, there's a new threat. Fears that this weekend's rain could lead to another disaster. And it's win or go home. We're digging into the conference championship weekend. 4 teams remain. The Chiefs, Bills, Eagles, and Commanders all battling it out for a spot in the Super Bowl. Going to keep you entertained on Sunday. Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah Sellers is on assignment. We are going to begin this hour in Washington, where President Trump is checking off another campaign promise. This time, he has signed an executive order to declassify a trove of government documents related to some historic assassinations. Former President John F. Kennedy, his younger brother, former Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. Now, the president believes their public release will end the mystery surrounding their deaths. All this comes as one of the president's most contentious immigration orders was dealt a big blow on Thursday. A federal judge in Seattle temporarily blocked Mr. Trump's order seeking to end birthright citizenship. The judge called it blatantly unconstitutional. The president said he would appeal the decision. Washington State's Attorney General praised the ruling.
We are thrilled that the court saw the seriousness and the urgency of the complaint and request for a temporary restraining order. This is step one, but to hear the judge from the bench say that in his 40 years as a judge, he has never seen something so blatantly unconstitutional sets the tone for the seriousness of this effort.
In just a few moments, we're going to chat with NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez. But first, let's get to our Homeland Security correspondent, Julia Ainsley. Julia, good morning. So let's start with the president's push to try and end birthright citizenship. Tell us more about the federal judge's ruling here. What were the arguments and what happens next?
It was a quick and decisive blow, Joe. We heard yesterday from an 85-year-old judge who was appointed by Ronald Reagan, thought to be a conservative, say that he couldn't even believe that the Justice Department lawyers that were defending this executive order could take the bar and defend something so blatantly unconstitutional. He said it boggled his mind. And just as quickly as they wrapped up those arguments, the judge signed a temporary restraining order that blocks that birthright citizenship order from going into effect. They had until February 19th to make that decision. That's when the executive order would have gone into effect. And he went ahead and made it right away, Joe. So, of course, we can expect the Trump administration to appeal this. It will probably go up to the Supreme Court. Just to back up for a second here about what this would do, the executive order made it so that any child who was born to a mother who was unlawfully or even lawfully but temporarily in the United States could not be a U.S. citizen unless the father was a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident. That would mean even people who were here legally on visas could not have children who are U.S. citizens. And also, Trump has said repeatedly the U.S. is the only country that grants birthright citizenship. That is also false because Canada, Mexico, and some countries in South America do it as well. And it's something that's enshrined in the 14th Amendment. And so the lawyers who argued against this on behalf of 22 states and others said that in order for the president to change something like the 14th Amendment, he would need to go through Congress to get another constitutional amendment, which requires a 2/3 vote, and that he could not do it this way, Joe.
All right, let's talk about some other immigration news. On Thursday, we did see ICE agents carry out another immigration raid, this time in Newark, just outside New York City. On Wednesday, we saw something similar in Boston. What can you tell us about this latest operation?
Well, this was a workplace raid, which does change the game officially from what the Biden administration was doing to what this new Trump administration is doing. by and large, the numbers of arrests have not greatly exceeded that of an average day under the Biden administration. For example, they were looking at about 300 arrests a day in September, the latest number for which data is available, the latest month for which data is available from the Biden administration. It was about 280 a day. So it wasn't a huge jump. A workplace raid does change, though, because that is something the Biden administration, by and large, backed off of. We saw workplace raids under the first Trump administration. There's a very legendary raid they did on a Mississippi poultry plant. A workplace raid means that they're not necessarily picking up the worst of the worst criminals. They're picking up undocumented immigrants who are working in this country illegally. It can take them by surprise. And we're hearing harsh blowback from the senators of New Jersey, from the mayor of Newark, saying that this is something that really disrupts their community. When you make people afraid to go to their jobs, afraid to send their children to school, that this is something that they really think that the Trump administration, where they think they've crossed a line. We should say it's not a new line, at least for Trump. We have not yet seen them go into other places, such as those sensitive locations where they now say they can go, like schools, hospitals, places of worship. That hasn't happened yet. But this is all part of a strategy for shock and awe, as we understand, something the president promised he would do on mass deportations because they want to make a splash coming in. The thing is, Joe, they don't necessarily have more money. They're trying to expand the power of the federal government, use other federal agencies to make arrests. So we need to watch exactly to see what changes and what's different going forward. But this, I think, would be the first market change that we've seen from the past administration's practices.
And Julia, I also know you're watching what's happening at the Mexican border, where Mr. Trump has now deployed 1,500 troops as part of his sweeping immigration orders. So what are we actually seeing there, and just what else is the Trump administration planning?
Well, the numbers of migrants who have been encountered crossing between ports of entry, what we would call illegally, has dropped dramatically, almost half from December. And December was already a very low border crossing month. But I think a big thing to point out is that the asylum system, as we know it, Joe, has effectively come to a complete halt. In fact, we have reporting yesterday from places across the southwest border where migrants were being turned back before they could even access legal ports of entry. That has always been an access point under U.S. law where migrants could come, turn themselves in legally, and request asylum if they could show they had a reasonable fear of persecution if they were returned to their home country. These are not people who are trying to sneak into this country or evade apprehension. They're walking up and making their claim. As we understand now, they're being turned back. And since the president turned off that CBP One app set up by the prior administration that allowed migrants to make asylum appointments on their phones, there really is no way for migrants to claim asylum. I think this is something we're going to continue to see play out in lawsuits, Joe.
All right, Julia Ainsley, a lot to cover this morning. Thank you so much. Let's head to the White House now, where Gabe Gutierrez is standing by. Gabe, good morning. So before we get to the present, let's talk a little about the past and this move by President Trump to actually declassify government documents on the assassinations of JFK, RFK, Martin Luther King Jr. Tell us, why is he doing it? How soon could they be seen by the public?
Hi there, Joe. Good morning. Well, there are about 5 million JFK files, and the National Archives says about 97% or so have already been released, but it's that last 3% that may hold the most tightly kept secrets. Now, Joe, over the last several decades, there have been a lot of questions and conspiracy theories about whether Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. Well, President Trump now saying that everything will be revealed, and in signing this executive order, he's ordering the government files, all of them, for the assassination of JFK, of RFK, Robert F. Kennedy, and also Martin Luther King Jr. Now, in terms of timing, it won't happen right away. It won't happen overnight. The JFK files, the government has about 2 weeks to come up with a plan to release them. The files for Martin Luther King Jr. and RFK, that could take about at least a month and a half, Joe.
All right, let's go back to modern times now. Fox News has also released the second part of its interview with President Trump. Among the subjects discussed, the Russia-Ukraine war. We know one of Mr. Trump's campaign promises was to end that war. At one point, he said within 24 hours of taking office. We know that didn't happen, but what is he saying about that war?
Yeah, clearly, and that President Trump had said that before, that he'd end it on day one. Clearly, it hasn't happened. But over the last several days, several of his public statements about Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Zelensky have been seemed aimed to try and get to some sort of negotiation, to some sort of deal, as he called it. But in that interview you mentioned overnight on Fox News, he had some tough words for President Zelensky. Listen.
Zelensky, I will say this, he wants to settle now. He's had enough. He shouldn't have allowed this to happen either. No. You know, if he's no angel, he shouldn't have allowed this war to happen. We could have made a deal, and it would have been a deal that would have been a nothing deal. I could have made that deal so easily. And Zelensky decided that I want to fight.
Now, President Trump says that he wants to meet immediately with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and he's also calling on China, which he says has power over the situation, to also get involved and get to some sort of an agreement. Joe.
All right, Gabe, another headline on Thursday. The president signed another executive order. This one pardons 23 anti-abortion rights activists, and that's ahead of today's March for Life demonstration along the National Mall. It marks the anniversary of the Roe versus Wade decision. We know that he is expected to address those crowds virtually. What else can you tell us about all this?
Oh, yes. So those 23 anti-abortion protesters, their names haven't been released, but the White House says at least some of them are in jail. And certainly this rally that we're set to have today on the National Mall, this is the third one ever since the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And this is something that President Trump has talked about extensively, that he picked the judges that overturned Roe v. Wade, even though he says the decision over abortion should now be left up to the states. But by pardoning those 23 anti-abortion protesters, he's clearly looking to send a message to anti-abortion, to those who oppose abortion. And at this rally today, as you said, he's expected to speak virtually, but Vice President J.D. Vance is expected to speak in person, Joe.
All right, Gabe, thank you so much. An exhausted Southern California is getting some welcome news this morning. Firefighters say they have finally gained control over most of the wildfires that have destroyed thousands of homes over the last 3 weeks, killing more than 24 people. Now there's a new concern. Los Angeles has more rain forecast for this week than it has seen in more than 8 months. And officials warn that could lead to life-threatening mudslides, flash floods, and toxic runoff from charred debris. NBC's Liz Kreutz is in Pacific Palisades with more on these new worries.
Well, hey, Joe. Yeah, firefighters continue to battle multiple brush fires that have been popping up all across Southern California. We've been describing it like a game of whack-a-mole. Firefighters put out one fire and then another one starts. Yesterday, we saw brush fires from Ventura County that forced evacuations of a university there down to San Diego. There was one in La Jolla that forced evacuations in a populated area. Thankfully, they were able to knock that one down quickly. But then there was this border fire that's currently burning down by the border. It's now more than 800 acres. Thankfully, it's in a pretty rural area, but of course, it's still a concern with firefighters just seeing so many fires popping up across the region. The good news is, though, officials are hoping that the changing weather will help with these dry conditions. Like you mentioned, rain is in the forecast for the weekend, which is some good news, but it also does bring some other potential challenges and concerns about possible mudslides from all of this debris here, as well as toxic runoff from this debris. We've been watching as crews have been going around to the different burn scar areas, fortifying the burn scars, try to create a perimeter with concrete barriers to try to keep in that debris to prevent too much toxic debris from getting into the waterways here. But overall, that is some positive news. California, Southern California, now in what experts are calling extreme drought conditions for the first time now in 2 years. It's been months since we've seen rain. President Trump is expected to come here today. He'll arrive this afternoon, and he's planning to visit and survey some of the fire damage in communities like this here in the Pacific Palisades. Governor Newsom has said that he has reached out to the president. They have yet to speak directly, he said, but Governor Newsom says he plans to be there on the tarmac when the president arrives. Joe.
All right, Liz, thank you so much. And meteorologist Michelle Grossman has her eyes on Southern California this morning. Plus, much of the country starting to thaw out a little after that lengthy deep freeze. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Yeah, it's a gradual warm up, but we're going to see much better temperatures as we go through the later part of the weekend. Still really cold in spots. That's one of the big weather stories. Of course, the winds easing is another big weather story, and the rain moving in for Southern California Saturday and also Sunday. We'll talk more about that. Snowy conditions today through the Intermountain West, and it is a cold start in portions of the Southeast. We're looking at temperatures below freezing in many, many spots. Let's start with the fire weather threat. The good news is we do have a relaxed wind today. We have pretty gusty winds right now. That's going to continue to ease throughout the day. So we still do have 10 million under red flag warnings. That will be expired, though, by 10 o'clock local time. Unfortunately, there still is an elevated risk because the air is still so dry and because the ground is still so dry. So if a fire does ignite, we could see that fire expanding as we go throughout today. Places like Santa Clarita, Temecula, San Diego, over to Ramona as well. But look, as we head into the weekend, there's that area of low pressure moving from the north to the south. It's going to bring snow into the upper elevations of the mountains. It's going to bring that lower elevation rain. The good news is we're not so concerned right now about localized flash flooding or the mudslides, because it looks like this rain is going to come in a nice increment. We're going to see a half inch to an inch. Then Sunday we'll see a little bit more, but we're going to continue to watch that throughout the weekend in case we get any flare-ups with any of those rains. So we could see some localized flooding with those fresh burn scars, but hopefully we're going to see the rain kind of coming in those nice, stable amounts. Now, as we look towards Saturday, we do have a flash flood risk in place, just in case Santa Barbara to Santa Clarita, Los Angeles, down to places in extreme Southern California, San Bernardino as well. That continues on Sunday. We're going to see the rain starting in Southern California later in the evening and then expanding into Sunday. So this is what Sunday looks like, a marginal risk still for LA, Temecula down to San Diego, where we're seeing those burn areas. Then as we go throughout the rest of the weekend, we're going to see more rain on Monday as well. Look at this. We haven't talked about this for quite a while. This is good news. We have winter alerts throughout portions of the southwest because we have that area of low pressure moving in. So that's going to bring in some more moisture, and that's going to be really good news. All right, slightly milder. We're going to say that in quotes because it is still really cold outside. We're looking at temperatures in the 20s today in Detroit. That's 9 degrees below normal. But look at Dodge City finally warming up to average, above average in Dodge City, 50 degrees. That's 4 degrees above what is typical for this time of year. It's still really chilly, though, in the Gulf Coast into the southeast. Tampa, 55 degrees, 46 in Charleston, and 30 degrees in Boston. That's 5 degrees below what is typical for this time of year. Another chilly day, but again milder in New York City, getting closer, ever so close to that freezing mark, 30 degrees, 8 degrees below normal. Still in the 50s in Jacksonville, looking better. Tampa, 62, and 62 in Houston, 59. That's right where you're supposed to be on Sunday in Dallas. And then as we go into next week, Joe, look at this. We're going to be into the 40s, 41 by next Tuesday in New York City. Getting there slow but sure.
Shorts weather if you're from Minnesota, I'll tell you, right? All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate it. Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, a new warning about a scam targeting your wallet, the texts to watch out for, and how you can protect yourself. Up first, Hamas is set to release more hostages this weekend. We're going to have the latest out of the Middle East next. We're back with the latest on the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. A senior Hamas official said on Thursday the terror group will hand over the names of 4 hostages to Israel today ahead of their expected release tomorrow. Nearly a week ago, 3 female hostages were returned to Israel and reunited with their loved ones. In a call with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu on Thursday, the parents of the freed women urged him to bring the other hostages home. His reply, "We didn't give up and we won't give up on the others." For more on this, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Danielle Hamamdjian, who is in Jerusalem. Danielle, good morning. So just first of all, what more do we know about this expected hostage exchange tomorrow?
Well, good morning, Joe. That's right. We're on the eve of the second hostages for prisoners swap. And if Hamas sticks to the terms of the deal, they should be communicating today to Israeli authorities the names of the 4 female hostages to be released tomorrow. Among them will likely be female soldiers. How many exactly, that is still unclear. Now, the names should be communicated to the mediators in Doha. Last week, they also published the names online, so we're watching for that update in the next few hours. Israeli media, Joe, is also reporting that Hamas will provide an update, as you mentioned, of the remaining hostages to be released in the first phase of the deal. That would bring us to 26. Keep in mind, the families of those hostages have, for the most part of 475 days or so now, have not known, haven't been told whether or not their loved ones are dead or alive. So they might actually find out later today if they did survive or if they did not. Israeli officials have been clear all along leading up to the announcement of the ceasefire that they knew there would be a special price to pay for the female soldiers, which means that Tomorrow, among the Palestinian prisoners being released, first of all, how many will be released will depend on how many hostages come back alive. But there will be those serving life sentences, and they won't be released into the West Bank, as was the case last Sunday. They'll be released and sent to a third country, possibly Turkey, Qatar, or Egypt. Joe.
Just can't imagine what these families are going through waiting for this news. Let's talk, Danielle, about the ceasefire. Since it was put in place, Hamas militants have started parading through the streets of Gaza. We've seen them waving their flag, carrying rifles. These public displays have sent the message that despite these 15 months of war and Netanyahu's aim to eradicate them, the terror group does still have power in the region. Just what has been the reaction among Palestinians and Israelis?
Well, you're right. The images did not go down very well in Israel. That is for sure. Go back to November. I don't know if you remember this, but the former Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, said at the time when he was pushing for a ceasefire deal that it was his assessment that Israel had achieved the goal it had set out for itself. Fast forward to just last week, in one of his last speeches as Secretary of State, he said that the U.S. now believes that Hamas has recruited almost as many fighters as it has lost. And so for many, that is not the definition of victory, which is why many, among them Palestinian leaders, believe Israel has shifted its focus and its fire to the West Bank. We've seen all week Operation Iron Wall launched in the city of Jenin. At least 12 people were killed. And Palestinian leaders also believe it's not just Jenin, but there's a case of collective punishment here for the more than 3 million Palestinians who live in the West Bank, because we've seen a lot more checkpoints set up, gates effectively cutting off the flow and the movement of Palestinians in the West Bank. Journeys that should take you 2 hours from one end to another can take 10 hours. People cannot do the most basic things. And according to Israeli media, this is going to be the case for at least until the end of the first phase of this deal, which, as you know, will last another 5 weeks.
All right, Danielle, thank you so much. Appreciate your reporting. Let's get some more international headlines now. North Korea is allegedly preparing to send more troops to join Russia's fight against Ukraine. NBC's Matt Bodner has that and other world news. Matt, good morning.
Joe, good morning. South Korea's military says today that it believes North Korea is preparing to send additional troops to Russia to support the Kremlin's war in Ukraine. This follows reports that the current contingent of North Korean troops, the ones already fighting alongside Russian forces, have suffered heavy casualties on the front lines, where, of course, they are engaged with Ukrainian forces, largely in Russia's Kursk region. These reports also follow President Trump's demand that President Putin end the war in Ukraine. Moving along now to The Hague, a prosecutor working for the International Criminal Court has applied for arrest warrants for 2 high-ranking Taliban leaders in Afghanistan. The officials are accused of being responsible for the, quote, crime against humanity of persecution on gender grounds, adding that they have criminal responsibility for the persecution of Afghan girls and women, as well as persecution of people perceived by the Taliban as being allies of girls and women. A panel of ICC judges will now review that application. And let's wrap things up this hour in Antarctica, where a massive iceberg is drifting on a collision course with a remote island that is home to millions of penguins and seals. Scientists are calling this behemoth wall of ice a megaberg, and is currently the world's largest iceberg. It's about the size of Rhode Island. Now, what happens when the megaberg makes contact with South Georgia Island, that's uncertain. It will either be pushed around the island by sea currents, or it will become lodged ashore, and if that happens, it could harm the local wildlife. Joe?
All right, Matt, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Coming up, there are growing concerns over bird flu. After the break, we're going to dig into what you need to know about the virus and how it could even impact your bottom line. That's next. Welcome back. We want to return to our top story, President Trump's crackdown on immigration. Among the people now facing uncertainty under this new administration would have been called the Dreamers. Those are undocumented immigrants who came to the U.S. as children and have some protection under DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Now, in the days before President Trump took office, some of them took advantage of a unique opportunity to leave and re-enter the country legally, a plan that did come with serious risks. NBC News correspondent David Noriega followed one group as they crossed the border.
On a chilly morning in San Diego, 260 immigrants gathered for what could be a life-changing trip across the U.S.-Mexico border.
These people are all dreamers. They were brought to the U.S. without papers when they were little. They all grew up in the United States, but they've been undocumented their whole lives.
Each of them received special permission from U.S. immigration authorities, known as advance parole, to leave and legally re-enter the country.
When they cross the border back into San Diego this afternoon, they're going to do so with permission. They're going to be setting foot in the United States for the first time in their lives, legally, with papers.
Among them is Yesenia, who came to California from Mexico when she was only 6. 12 years ago, she received DACA, an Obama-era program that allowed her to work legally and now to apply for advance parole.
Hello.
Yesenia is 38 now and a single mother to 9-year-old Anthony. The night before the trip, she dropped him off with a neighbor.
Listen to me. That's only if in case mommy does not come tomorrow, okay? And I have to call grandma to come and pick you up. You use this. You know what this is, right?
The passport?
Yes.
Even with advance parole, leaving the country is a big risk because getting back into the U.S. is not guaranteed.
It's due to the discretion of the officers.
So how do you feel about that?
Scared.
But for many, it's a risk worth taking. Applying for a green card and eventually citizenship is not an avenue available to most immigrants who entered the country illegally, even if they were children at the time. But getting permission to leave, including for educational or work purposes, and then re-entering the country legally, can clear the way for, let's say, a U.S. citizen family member to petition for their permanent status. And that is why legal aid groups organized this trip.
It finally takes away this legal technicality that has been keeping them in this limited status and in a fear of being separated from their families.
And they squeezed in the trip just days before Donald Trump took office. While anyone with DACA can apply for advance parole, some are concerned that that ability could go away under Trump. And changes to DACA itself are also likely. The program is in limbo due to legal challenges from Republican-led states driven by Texas.
Trump himself tried to end DACA in his first term, and he took swift action to end birthright citizenship since starting his second term, an executive order already facing constitutional challenges. But Trump also recently said that he wants to find a solution for Dreamers.
We have to do something about the Dreamers because these are people that have been brought here at a very young age.
The White House did not respond to our request for comment. Many Dreamers aren't taking any chances.
In Tijuana, the group heard lectures and visited migrant shelters to meet the requirements for advance parole.
So we're all getting back on the bus. We're going to head back to the border to cross into the United States. This is a big moment.
Listen, how are you feeling right now?
Nervous. My hands are sweating.
Just try and keep your nerves in check so that you can answer and listen to the questions that they're asking you.
We just got in line to cross the border back into the United States. What's going to happen next is that all the DACA recipients are going to get off the bus and cross the border on foot. So once they're approved to come back into the United States, that is the door that they walk through.
Now I gotta run to my son.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for everyone. Of course, I'm gonna turn on my phone.
Yeah, you can turn on your phone.
Tony,
Mom, I'm doing homework right now.
you're doing your homework. Good job, baby. Mommy's coming home with you, okay? I love you.
Thanks to David Noriega for that report. President Trump did try to end the DACA program during his first term. It's unclear what will happen to it or to advance parole in his second term. Now to the growing concerns over bird flu. The outbreak has now spread to farms here on the East Coast, and it's forcing farmers to make some very tough choices. A duck farm on Long Island in New York said it's going to have to euthanize 99,000 of its birds. That's because the virus was discovered among the flock. This nationwide outbreak is triggering egg shortages and higher prices, which you've probably noticed in the grocery aisle. And concerns are now growing over how the Trump administration will handle the surge. It is actually calling for a pause on public messaging from federal health agencies. For more on what people should know about the virus, let's bring in Dr. Kavita Patel. Dr. Patel, good to have you with us. So we're now seeing these bird flu outbreaks in farms from coast to coast. Talk about why this is a concern for humans.
Yeah, so Joe, every time this virus has a chance to spread, and especially as these large flocks or dairy farms get infected. And keep in mind, even that duck farm, just one duck has to be sick in order to kind of cull the whole flock, because out of safety concerns, because it's so easy to transmit. That just gets us closer to potential mutations that could lead to even human-to-human transmission, which is what we really want to avoid. So we want to try to do as much to keep it down in the animal population. But unfortunately, we're seeing it spreading further and further and in different animals, including domestic animals.
So we know that handling animals does carry a risk for infection for humans. Are there other ways it can be transmitted? I know some might be wondering, okay, if I actually do get my hands on some eggs at the supermarket, are they safe to eat?
Yeah, so anything that's kind of cooked or treated and heated are safe to eat, and especially raw eggs, just given what the United States is doing to monitor milk supply. Almost 100% of commercial milk supply is pasteurized, and it's also getting tested. So what you're buying off the shelves in your stores, and especially if you're cooking poultry, I would not recommend anybody, even outside of bird flu, eating uncooked poultry. But as long as you're cooking poultry and keeping all the kind of safety precautions that we would recommend with raw eggs or any of those things, that is fine. It changes a little bit when we're talking about unpasteurized products, raw milk, for example, and we've got advisories across the country to just avoid consumption of raw milk because it's not heated. Once you're heating the milk, you get rid of the virus. So I would say that that ranks higher than what people should be concerned about, because we know that people do drink raw milk, cow milk, as well as other animals.
Yeah, we are seeing more people drink raw milk these days, so it's important to know what the safety guidance is on that. Let's talk about the government response now, because this is an issue you know well. As we mentioned earlier, the Trump administration ordered a pause on all non-emergency public messaging from federal health agencies, like the Centers for Disease Control. As our colleagues at NBCNews.com note, a short pause in messaging is not uncommon as new administrations get up to speed, so these communications will hopefully start back up again on February 1st. But in the interim, how could this impact the bird flu outbreak? Just when we see a government transition like this, what are some of the potential things to keep an eye on?
Yeah, Joe, I think the biggest thing here is what you mentioned, that it can be common, but what's unusual this time around, two things. It's incredibly broad and widespread across all health agencies and encompassing many communications. You mentioned that it's non-emergent, but I think that even the staff inside of these agencies, these are tens of thousands of people working on all sorts of daily advisories, even they're a bit confused. Well, what exactly constitutes an emergency? We know that drug recalls, safety recalls, even alerts about kind of the duck farms and what's happening there, those are emergencies. But getting communication through social media for doctors such as myself about what people would recommend or symptoms to watch out for, is that considered emergent? In this scenario, those communications are not necessarily flowing. So I think that it's somewhat normal. This is pretty broad, and I think we'll be watching, because in this era of social media, Joe, this is how we consume information, and it's very different than before, and almost even more pressing when you have some of these global outbreaks or things like the bird flu or even the regular flu. It doesn't matter what's happening. We need that communication.
When it comes to just trying to control an outbreak like this, I mean, how big of a role does the federal government play?
Yeah, the federal government is kind of the highway system for all of our information. So it's not just information about what's happening in the moment, but it's also information and guidance on what local health agencies need to do. So getting back to that example of a duck farm in New York, there's a lot of guidance that goes out, not just to the agriculture community, but to the health community, what symptoms to look for, because you want to make sure that even if you thought you've limited it in animals, that you want to make sure that there was no animal to human consumption or animal to human spread. And so it's incredibly important, because think of it as the highway and the offshoots with the streets, and you need to have all of those covered in order to deal with an outbreak. We learned that the hard way in COVID, and I hope we learn that lesson now.
Life is a highway. All right, Dr. Patel, thanks so much. Good to have you with us. Now to a warning about a new scam popping up on cell phones across the country. Users are receiving texts that say they owe money for unpaid tolls. But cybersecurity experts say it's all a plot to break into your bank account. NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello has more.
So I've received several of these text messages telling me I owe $6.99 to Massachusetts Easy Pass. Since I rarely drive there, I was suspicious. When I asked the newsroom if anybody else had received these messages, almost everybody's hands went up. On its website, Massachusetts Easy Pass warns the overdue toll message is a scam, and it's happening across the country. Criminals posing as tolling authorities in Washington State, California, Colorado, Texas, Florida, Minnesota, Virginia, Connecticut, probably every state, and other countries too. When Glenn DeArmond got the message, he clicked on the link.
It was awfully odd that I got a reminder that I owe $6.99.
Cybersecurity pros say the scam software was built in China and sold to criminal gangs around the world.
What they really want is that one-time code from your bank so they can enroll your stolen credit card in Apple Pay or Google Pay.
The California Attorney General with this warning: the scam is designed to deceive drivers into entering banking or credit card information into a website. Called a smishing scheme using SMS messaging, cyber pros say it's the latest twist to a scam telling Americans they owe money for a postal delivery. The expert advice: be suspicious of any message from a tolling agency. Call the agency's published number if you're not sure, and never click on the link or accept a one-time code that could open your bank account.
If you are unfortunate enough to have been phished for your debit card payment information, that could be especially hard for you.
They could wipe you out.
Absolutely.
Tom Costello, thanks so much for that report. Just remember, there are so many of these scams out there right now, smishing and beyond. It's important to have your guard up anytime someone is emailing or texting you demanding money. All right, it might be hard to believe, but tax season is almost here. After the break, we're going to dig into what you need to know to make filing this year as smooth as possible. Welcome back. Believe it or not, tax filing season is just around the corner. On Monday, the IRS will begin accepting your tax returns for last year. Many hope they're getting some money back from Uncle Sam. Keep in mind, the average taxpayer pocketed a refund of around $3,000 for 2023. Of course, first, you got to do a little bit of work. So we've got you covered on how to make taxes as painless as possible this year. We're lucky to have Mark Stieber here for more on this. He's Jackson Hewitt's Chief Tax Information Officer. Mark, always good to have you with us because you give it to us straight up. No filter. You tell us just as it is. Let's start with this first question that some people might be asking, whether they do it themselves or use some software at home versus using a professional like yourself. Obviously, you're a professional, so you might have a bias here. I could say when I switched over from doing it myself to professional, I did get more money back. But is it for everyone? For those who are weighing that question, whether to do it themselves or spend a little more money on a pro, what do you say?
Well, America was founded by pioneers, adventurers. We were the first to the moon. Trump was to go to Mars. So we are risk takers, and that's great. However, when it comes to your largest single financial transaction, I got to tell you, I caution people on doing that unless you do two things. One, you got to put in the work. There's no shortcutting to understanding some of the tax rules, the tax laws, even the tax language and linguistics. You can misunderstand a word and cost yourself money. And a lot of people think this, and this is the second point, oh, the IRS will figure out that I have shared custody. And when it asked about my dependent and the 5 different definitions that I'm sharing with my ex, they caught that I messed that up or either included it and shouldn't have, and the ex took it and filed a claim, or you didn't claim it and you missed out $6,000. So adventurous and experimenting on your taxes, unless you want to put in the work, is really not a good investment of your time. It's really competitive out there in the market. You can find someone, you can build a life relationship. They'll make your stress less, probably get you more money, give you tips in a voluminous amount of rule change. It's just smarter to get some help, unless, again, you want to put in the time. But if you shortcut it, just going to pick those things in at the last minute, then you're going to cost yourself money or risk.
And that was a totally hypothetical situation you mentioned there just a moment ago. All right, so let's talk about what the first step is for people who might have some time this weekend to get ready. And what are the benefits of doing this right away?
Oh, there's many benefits. The first of which is 100 million people will get $300 billion, or $3,000 average refund. File early, get your money early. You don't have to be Warren Buffett to know that's financially smart. Secondly, and worse, he talked about the scammers and schemers. When the government's giving out $300 billion, that attracts a certain bad element. So there's people out there buying data on the dark web, filing fake tax returns, doing all sorts of unscrupulous things. If you file early, the IRS locks up your data, yours, your spouse if you have one, your dependents. So if you file early, you're protected from any of those scammers. A lot of people say, I'm going to file later because I'm going to owe. Well, again, bad idea. If you file early, you can find out exactly what you owe. And here's the secret for your viewers. You still don't have to pay until April 15th. You file now, lock up your data, and then on 15th, you have your bank account debited, you charge it to a credit card, or just mail in a check. So filing early has been smart in the past, just for the obvious reasons. But now, with all the bad people, smarter than ever.
Any big changes that we should be aware of this year?
There's a lot of change. Life changes are bigger than tax law changes because people are still getting married, divorced, sharing custody. But the big one to watch for is the new 1099K threshold. If you're getting paid through any of those third-party platforms, PayPal, Venmo, Apple Pay. If you went above $5,000 for the whole year, much different in the past, you're going to get a 1099-K saying, hey, you got this money. It's probably business money. So is the IRS. And that's just the first of 3 years. 25 this year, it's $2,500. Next year, $600. So it's probably good to find your way to doing it right now. But the 1099-K, big change, second in comparison, in my opinion, to life changes. So tell your pro about the new gig, crypto, whatever else you're doing.
Very, very quickly, life changes. What are the things people should know about that?
Yeah, it's more than just married and had a kid. I'll be honest with you. Taking care of dependent parents, a big one right now. That could be your dependent and their medical and a lot of other stuff. Side hustles, grown since the pandemic, and that's a very complicated area with a lot of great tax rules. Cryptocurrency starting this year, not the tax return you're working on. The new 1099 digital asset will be coming out with your crypto summary, both to you and to the IRS. So keep track of those digital asset activities. That's going to be monitored very closely starting in about 11 months.
Mark Stieber, as always, appreciate having you on. Thank you so much. Some more money headlines now, starting with, hey, we were just talking about this, President Trump's latest crypto push. CNBC's Savannah now has that and some other money news. Savannah, good morning.
Joe, good morning to you and happy Friday. Yeah, President Trump signing an executive order yesterday to promote Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, paving the way towards a possible national stockpile. Now, most of the order focuses on creating technology and rules around regulation of crypto while also promoting the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. Now, Trump was a crypto critic during his first term, but changed his tune on the campaign trail last year, attracting big donations from the industry. Tesla is launching a refreshed version of its best-selling Model Y in the U.S. as it tries to reverse its first annual sales decline in more than a decade. The launch series version of the Model Y starts at just under $60,000 with deliveries set to start in March. Now, the new Model Y has an estimated range of 320 miles on a single charge. And Blue Sky, that's an upstart social media app, has added millions of users looking for an alternative to X. But don't expect to see posts from your favorite NFL team or players anytime soon, because the league reportedly told the New England Patriots this week to shut down the team's account. The Patriots say they were told Blue Sky isn't an approved platform. Teams and players are allowed to post on X and other platforms, as the NFL has a content partnership with X, Reddit, Threads, and Instagram. The NFL has declined comment, Joe.
Interesting. All right, Savannah, Thank you so much. On Monday, the world will commemorate 80 years since the liberation of Auschwitz. The Nazi extermination camp in occupied Poland is where at least 1 million people were murdered, mostly Jews. Now it serves as a symbol of the Holocaust. NBC's Jay Gray spoke with one man who survived in the camp when he was just 4 years old. Jay is live outside the Auschwitz site in Poland. Jay, good morning.
Joe, good morning to you. Auschwitz Park Museum, Park Memorial. It's a place that marks the horrors of what happened here in the past, but also stands as a memorial to honor those who were lost and survivors. And it still, according to many here, teaches valuable lessons that are vital even today. The pictures, 8 decades later, still somber, haunting. And for survivors, these images bring back painful memories.
I seem to remember the smell, the foul, disgusting smell that I found out later is the smell of burning bodies. And I remember going out looking at trash cans to find moldy potato skins to eat to survive.
This is Michael Bornstein, 80 years ago, a 4-year-old prisoner inside Auschwitz, protected, often hidden by his mother and grandmother. He survived. But at least 1 million held inside the death camp, including more than 200,000 children and young prisoners, did not.
This is the biggest cemetery in the world, I think. So this is not only a museum, it is a very special place where people suffered so much.
As the world pauses to remember the horror that took place here and the liberation of Auschwitz 80 years ago, Bornstein is going back.
I don't like to go back, believe me. I have no desire to be in Auschwitz.
He makes the trip out of respect.
To say the Kaddish, the prayer for all the dead people, and especially my father and my brother who were there.
And to make sure the world continues to learn from the evil he witnessed as a child.
Hate and bigotry has no place in this world. And hopefully the lesson is we need to stand up to that.
Hope that endures from survivors who've seen the world at its worst. The ceremony commemorating the liberation of this camp is set for Monday. Dignitaries, leaders from around the world will travel here, but we won't hear from him. That honor is reserved for the voices, the stories of the survivors. They will be the only ones speaking during that ceremony. And, Joe, we expect 50 or so to make the journey here.
It is so important we keep telling these stories. Jay, thank you so much for making the trip and shining a light on this. We appreciate it. Yeah. More morning news now, just after the break. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Some NFL fans mean serious business when it comes to celebrating wins in the playoffs. For example, Eagles fans can purchase a pint of snow from last weekend's game. That's right, the Eagles teamed up with the Realists to sell some commemorative white stuff from the field after besting the Rams on Sunday. A pint was listed at $50. That represents the total points scored in the game. Bad news, though, after less than 24 hours on the market, it's sold out completely. But if you were so lucky to get your hands on a pint, you can expect it to be shipped with dry ice to help keep it cool. Fans are then encouraged to keep it in their freezer. Just be careful not to mix it up with your favorite ice cream or put it in a cocktail, first and foremost, because it's probably a little dirty. All right, speaking of the Eagles, the Birds will be looking to take care of business this weekend. They're one of 4 teams playing in the NFL Conference Championship games, hoping to reach Super Bowl 59. The Eagles will host the Washington Commanders in Philly, and the Kansas City Chiefs will once again face the Buffalo Bills in the latest battle of their playoff rivalry. For everything you need to know for Championship Weekend, we're joined by senior writer at The Athletic covering the NFL, Zach Rosenblatt. Zach, good to have you with us. So let's start with the NFC Championship game. Eagles, Commanders, they played twice this season, each won a game, but now with a Super Bowl trip on the line, what are you looking out for?
Yeah, it's Jaden Daniels is the story of this game and kind of this season. You know, he's had one of the best rookie seasons maybe ever. He led them to the NFC Championship game, I think, way earlier than anybody expected. He's turned a franchise around that has been tortured for a long time. And if he can keep it going, like, they really do have a chance in this game. The Eagles, I would say, are maybe the most talented team left in this field. But, you know, they do make mistakes. Jalen Hurts sometimes doesn't throw the ball down the field. So, you know, they do have a chance to pull off an upset, I think, in this game.
Let's talk about the AFC title game. That might be the one folks are a little more excited about. Too many storylines to follow here. The Bills, of course, have never won a Super Bowl, despite having many opportunities when I was a child. They're going to face the Chiefs again in the playoffs. The Chiefs want to keep their hopes of that three-peat alive. What do you expect?
Yeah, I mean, these games, when they play each other, are always exhilarating, especially in the playoffs. The Chiefs are the team you have to beat to get to the Super Bowl. Like, until they lose, you assume they're going to win. But it felt like this has been the Bills' year all year. Josh Allen might win MVP. They're going to try and run it down your throat with Josh Allen, with James Cook, and then try and stop you on defense. And if they can stop Patrick Mahomes from pulling off some miraculous comeback and Travis Kelce and from continuing his run as one of the best receivers in NFL history in the playoffs, like, they do have a chance, but you have to get past the Chiefs. That's just what it comes down to. All right,
so Super Bowl 59 now around the corner, a little more than 2 weeks away. We have to put you in a spot here. We want to get some of your predictions. Who do you think, first of all, is going to win the championship games this weekend?
You know, I think the most fun outcome would be Bills and Commanders, just because those are two fan bases that have been pretty tortured for a long time. But for prediction's sake, I'm going to say Bills-Eagles. I just think the Eagles, they do feel like a team that has figured it all out on both sides of the ball. If Jalen Hurts can have a good game, I do think they win that game. And then you get another Eagles-Bills Super Bowl as opposed to Eagles-Chiefs from a few years ago.
Why do you think the Bills do finally beat the Chiefs?
I just think they have something a little special about them this year. Josh Allen has a lot to prove. He has not gotten over the hump. And I don't know. I just feel like this is their year. And it's a very simple thing. It's not as much a football thing. But I do think that the Bills from start to finish have been one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the NFL. And I think they're going to close it out.
Yeah, do you think the Bills can finally win a Super Bowl this year?
Man, I hope so. Getting to as many Super Bowls as they have and losing, I feel so bad for that fan base. So I hope that if they get there, they can close it out.
See, I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan, so I know a thing about
tortured yourself. Yes.
About getting to a lot of Super Bowls and not winning them, though we haven't even gotten to the point of getting back to the Super Bowl anytime recently, so I appreciate it. Is there any player you're looking who could really just have a surprising impact this weekend or make a difference in any one of these games, someone who could just have a star moment?
I mean, the big one, and he's not under the radar, but Saquon Barkley has never been this far in the playoffs, and he's been kind of the reason why the Eagles have been as good as they have been on offense. And, you know, this could be like a Hall of Fame star-making moment for him. He already is a superstar, but this is the kind of thing you remember when you get to the Hall of Fame and the clips you show. And I think he has a real chance to get to the Super Bowl and really cement his place in history as one of the best running backs.
Yeah, he had a heck of a game this last weekend. All right. Thank you so much, Zach. Appreciate your time this morning. That is going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now. Don't go anywhere. The news continues right now. Good Friday morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is on assignment today. Right now on Morning News Now, a breath of fresh air in Southern California. Firefighters there now saying they've gained the upper hand on all of those major wildfires that have torched thousands of acres of land. Governor Gavin Newsom now pledging billions in new funding to aid in recovery efforts across the scorched region. But could rain in this weekend's forecast create yet another challenge for first responders? We've got team coverage. President Trump's immigration overhaul sending shockwaves throughout Washington and beyond. Commander-in-Chief firing off a deluge of Week 1 executive orders aimed at increasing security at the southern border and all but shutting off America's asylum process to migrants. More on the legal challenges he's now facing as a string of decades-old national mysteries re-enter the political spotlight. Also this morning, the country's bird flu crisis now spreading across nearly 25 states. Inflation battered consumers facing skyrocketing prices at the grocery store with eggs still in short supply. We've got the latest in just a moment. And it has been a whirlwind week in Washington, but we're capping it off with a little pandemonium on this Friday. We're going to take you to the nation's capital as one unbearably cute duo prepares to make their D.C. debut. One thing coming out of Washington we can all agree on this week. Let's begin in Southern California. Firefighters say they're finally getting control of most of the wildfires that have wiped out thousands of structures and killed more than 24 people in the last 3 weeks. But now there is a new concern. Los Angeles is forecast to get more rain this weekend than it has seen in over 8 months. And officials warn the weather is posing a whole new set of life-threatening risks. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz is live in Pacific Palisades with more on this. Liz, good morning.
Hey, Joe. Good morning. Yeah, firefighters continue to battle brush fires that just keep popping up around Southern California. But officials, like you said, are hopeful that the weather will change for the better. There is this rain forecast for the weekend, which is good news. It will hopefully help with the extraordinarily dry conditions here. But it does bring its own set of challenges, which include potential mudslides and runoff from all of this toxic debris.
This morning, parts of Southern California still burning. Overnight, a new fire growing near San Diego. Flames from the border fire spreading in a remote mountain area, burning through over 800 acres. Firefighters working to contain it this morning and evacuation orders issued. As the smoke from the Hughes fire still fills the sky north of Los Angeles, more than 10,000 acres scorched in less than 2 days. But firefighters now say they have it under control, along with the other major fires that devastated communities earlier this month, like Pacific Palisades and Altadena. California Governor Gavin Newsom announcing legislation directing $2.5 billion to help with recovery efforts.
This money will be made available immediately.
Conditions in the lower half of the state ripe for fire. For the first time in more than 2 years, Southern California is experiencing what experts call extreme drought. San Diego recording its driest start to winter in recorded history. But now, with rain on the way, wet weather could provide both relief and danger for burn-scarred land, including concerns over mudslides.
What can happen when there's rain so close to these massive fires?
You get a large debris flow, mud flow coming off of these hillsides that no longer have the brush to stabilize the dirt.
Crews are installing barriers to prevent hazardous runoff from toxic ash as residents continue to pick up the pieces and rebuild.
Now, President Trump is expected to visit Los Angeles today. He is expected to survey the communities ravaged by these wildfires, like here in the Pacific Palisades. We do know that Governor Newsom says that he has reached out to the president. They have not been able to speak directly, but the governor says that he hopes and plans to be there on the tarmac to greet President Trump when he arrives. Joe?
All right, Liz, thank you so much. For more on the weather out west and the rest of the country, meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us with the forecast. Hey, Michelle, good morning.
Hey there, Joe. Great to see you. Well, we're looking at 10 million people still impacted by red flag warnings this morning. The winds are still gusting this morning. They're going to start to relax as we go throughout the later part of this morning into the rest of the weekend. So we have red flag warnings from Santa Clarita to Riverside, Temecula, down to Escondido. And we're going to see a big change as we go throughout the weekend here. First, we're going to see the diminishing offshore. Right now, we're seeing the offshore winds. They're really dry. They're warming winds, just as Liz mentioned. The ground is so dry. The air is so dry. But look what happens as we go throughout this afternoon. Finally, we're going to see them switch around with this area of low pressure moving in from the north. So we're going to see cooler winds, more humid air moving in as well. That is really good news. That is today. That is tomorrow morning. And then things will change even more later tomorrow into Southern California. So rain is on the way. We're going to see the storm system spinning down the coast this weekend. Rain and snow in the LA area Saturday through Monday. So it's going to be a long duration event, which is really good news as well. 1 to 2 inches of rain is possible in the wettest locations, up to a foot of snow over the mountains. Where you see the white, that is where the snow will be falling, and we could see a foot of snow in some spots. The snow levels will come down to about 3,000 feet. Otherwise, we're looking at a ½ inch to an inch of rain in some spots. Again, by Sunday, could add up to a total of 2 inches. Now, we do have that burn scar threat, so the higher rain rates could produce debris flows in recent burn areas. But looking back on the discussion from Los Angeles, it looks like the concern isn't so great. We're looking at rainfall that's going to fall at a pretty steady rate. We could get banding that could produce heavier downpours. So that's what they're concerned about, and that's what they're going to be watching all weekend long. Now, another big story today, we're looking at slightly milder air. It's still cold, really, though, across the country. We're looking at 29 in Fargo, but that is a big difference from what we saw Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, even yesterday. 50 degrees in Dodge City. That is good news. Finally above normal there, 4 degrees above what is typical for this time of year. But east of the Mississippi, we are still quite chilly. We're looking at 37 in Nashville. That's about 11 degrees below what is typical for this time of year. And then just looking up and down the East Coast, 30 in Boston. It's below freezing there. 41 in Richmond, and it's still chilly in Tampa, 55. Corpus Christi, you're chilly too at 57. We'll keep it chilly, but still adding on a few degrees in the southeast tomorrow. Tampa back into the 60s, 62. That is about 10 degrees below what is typical for this time of year. Memphis above normal tomorrow, 36 in Chicago. That's going to feel good for them. They were negative. They were in the negative numbers earlier this week. 36 in Des Moines, and New York City, 30 degrees, still below freezing on Saturday. Finally getting up above freezing on Sunday, near 40 degrees. Sunday and Monday into the 40s in New York City on Tuesday. And then looking down to the south, looking much better too. Panama City, we're looking at temperatures in the 60s, 66 on Tuesday. Same story in New Orleans, 66 on Monday and 66 on Tuesday. Okay, we're also watching a quick clipper. Clipper system moves from the north. It doesn't have a lot of moisture to draw from because it's coming down from Canada. So it's a weak system. It's going to produce some light snow, but it will be blustery too, with winds gusting up to 30 miles per hour. This is all going to move off to the east by Saturday. We're going to see that front moving across the Great Lakes. So we could see some intense banding setting up once again. Lake effect snow is possible downwind of the Great Lakes, those usual typical spots that see heavy snowfall. So that will be the story on Saturday. And again, we could see quite a bit of snow downwind of those Great Lakes, locally up to 12 inches south of Watertown, northeast of Syracuse, those spots that typically see the banding setting up. For the rest of today, we are looking at that cold morning in the southeast. We had record lows yesterday, another really chilly start today. Snowy conditions in the Intermountain West, those winds easing once again in the Southern California area. Then as we go towards tomorrow, staying cold throughout the New England area, the Northeast, warming up finally in the Southeast. And yay, look at those onshore winds by Saturday in Southern California. So good news there. Joe?
Yeah, welcome there. All right. Thanks so much, Michelle. Yeah. Appreciate it. Sure. Turning now to the White House, President Trump is pressing ahead with his overhaul of the immigration system and shutting down the asylum process. In Texas, the first of the 1,500 troops deployed to the Mexican border have started to arrive. All this as Mr. Trump faces his first legal setback in his effort to end birthright citizenship. NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Hake has the latest.
We're just 4 days into this new administration, and they are moving quickly on the president's immigration agenda, tightening security at the border and attempting to remove undocumented immigrants already inside the country. But they're also running into legal setbacks and political backlash.
The first of 1,500 active-duty U.S. troops deployed by President Trump, arriving at an Army airfield in El Paso, Texas, to help boost border security. Trump's border czar promising more big changes are coming.
You're going to see border wall being constructed. You're going to see a lot of soldiers down there.
on the impediment progress and putting concertina wire up, border barriers.
Those barriers, multiple sources say, could include the expanded use of floating buoys like these, installed by the Border Patrol along the Rio Grande to deter migrant crossings. And those who do cross will find an asylum system all but shut down by a series of Trump executive orders.
It was really an invasion. We will not allow our territory to be violated.
It comes as ICE conducts raids in some cities, including Boston and in Newark, New Jersey, where the mayor says agents raided a local business, detaining, quote, undocumented residents as well as citizens, adding that one was a veteran who was asked for his military documentation. ICE saying agents sometimes encounter U.S. citizens while conducting field work and may request identification. Trump teasing more to come in a Fox News interview that aired overnight.
Now we have to get people out of our country that would have never been here.
But the president's plan to end birthright citizenship, which he considers a magnet for migrants, was dealt a blow Thursday. Trump's executive order would stop automatic citizenship going to children of undocumented immigrants, but a federal judge in Seattle temporarily blocking it. Judge John Kuhnauer, a Reagan appointee, on the bench for 40 years, writing, quote, I can't remember another case where the question presented is as clear as this one. This is a blatantly unconstitutional order. Trump reacting hours later.
Obviously, we'll appeal it. There's no surprises with that, Judge.
All right, Garrett Haake, thank you so much for that. President Trump is also keeping another campaign promise this morning. He has ordered the declassification of a batch of government files related to the historic assassinations of former President John F. Kennedy, former Senator Robert Kennedy, and civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. NBC News Chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander has more on that.
Good day to you. They are among the most defining acts of political violence in this country's history. And for more than 60 years, there have been unanswered questions about them. Just take JFK's assassination. Did Lee Harvey Oswald act alone? Was there another shooter on that grassy knoll? Now, with the swipe of a pen, President Trump is ordering everything the government knows be made public. They are among the most sensational American murders of the 20th century. The assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, his younger brother Robert F. Kennedy, and the civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, President Trump is ordering the full public release of classified files related to their killings, saying it will end the mysteries surrounding them.
That's a big one, huh? A lot of people are waiting for this for years.
On JFK's 1963 death, the Warren Commission report concluded Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. But questions and conspiracy theories have lingered for decades, fueling an industry of books and films like Oliver Stone's 1991 hit movie JFK.
People got to know why he was killed.
Kennedy's nephew, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Trump's nominee to lead the Health and Human Services Department, has long insisted the CIA played a role in his uncle's murder, an allegation the CIA has denied. President Trump mentioning Kennedy when he signed the order.
Give that to RFK Jr.
RFK Jr. praising the president's action.
We need to have more transparency in our government, and he's keeping his promise to have the government tell the truth to the American people.
But JFK's grandson, Jack Schlossberg, is not pleased, posting in part, declassification is using JFK as a political prop when he is not here to punch back. There's nothing heroic about it. In 1968, RFK and MLK Jr.'s murders again shocked America. RFK's assassin, Sirhan Sirhan, remains in prison to this day. Members of Dr. King's family have asked if he was the victim of a government plot to kill him. The assassinations ushering in an era of distrust that President Trump may be looking to erase.
He feels, and other people might feel, that to have these final records and at least dispel some of the mysteries might help to clear away at least a little bit of the confusion and the distrust.
So when are we going to see those files? They won't be revealed immediately. On the JFK files in particular, officials now have 2 weeks to come up with a plan to share with President Trump. They have a month and a half to come up with plans for the RFK and MLK files. Get this, the National Archives has said that 97% of the roughly 5 million pages of JFK documents have already been released, but it's those last ones that could hold the most tightly kept secrets. Back to you.
All right, Peter, thank you so much. It has been a busy week in Washington. That's putting it mildly. It's not over yet, though, for the Senate as the confirmation process continues to play out for for President Trump's cabinet picks. National security picks are often the first to go through the confirmation process in order to ensure the nation's safety during the transition. Yesterday, John Ratcliffe was confirmed as director of the CIA. That follows Marco Rubio's confirmation as Secretary of State just hours after the inauguration. But the president's pick drawing the most attention on the Hill right now is still Pete Hegseth, his pick for defense secretary, despite allegations about his behavior toward women and excessive drinking, all of which Hegseth has denied. The Senate advanced his nomination on Thursday in a 51-49 vote. A final vote on his confirmation is expected later today. That might mean a long day for NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale, who joins us from Washington with more on all this. Ali, good morning. So yesterday's vote, largely along party lines, but two Republicans did break rank with their party. Let's first talk about those two specifically. Who are they? What are they saying?
Yeah, look, we're looking at these senators who are crossing party lines, basically saying that their concerns around Ratcliffe are not around his qualifications, which is central to the concerns around someone like Pete Hegseth, but or rather with the Ratcliffe nomination. They're instead concerned about him being able to basically say no to Trump. That's something that other nominees have been faced with. When it comes to Hegseth, though, the concerns go far deeper into his qualifications, into the kinds of allegations that we here at NBC News and other organizations have dug into deeply. And so overnight, we saw that Senators Collins and Murkowski both came forward saying they would not be voting in favor of Hegseth's nomination. These are the first Republicans that we've seen break rank. And look at the way they're explaining it. I'll bring up, for example, part of Murkowski's statement where she says in part, she remains concerned about the message that confirming Mr. Hegseth sends to women currently serving and those aspiring to join. Collins had a pretty similar explanation where she said, I met with Hegseth back in December. I talked to him about the comments he's made about women serving in combat. And basically, she said, I just don't believe that his position has actually changed. It kind of harkens back to something that Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand said during the confirmation hearings for Hegseth, where she said, I just don't necessarily think that you could have made such a transition on the way you think about women broadly to come sit before us today and say, oh, my opinion has changed dramatically 180 degrees in just the course of a few weeks. So clearly that argument from Gillibrand not falling on deaf ears. It's just a question of if it'll be enough. And there's an open question as to whether or not it will be.
So, Ali, let's remind viewers what else we've learned this week. An affidavit from Hegseth's former sister-in-law was submitted to senators. It detailed allegations of volatile and threatening conduct from Hegseth against his second wife, Samantha. That affidavit was in response to a letter from Senator Jack Reed, a Democrat, requesting a statement of her personal knowledge of Hegseth. We should note in a statement to NBC News, Hegseth's ex-wife said there was no physical abuse during their marriage. Hegseth has denied the allegations. Still in the wake of all this, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer made this statement yesterday.
One of the kindest words that might be used to describe Mr. Hegseth is erratic. And that's a quality you don't want as head of DOD.
All right, so the final vote for Hegseth's confirmation is expected later today. Given all we've heard and everything we've seen, what are the possible outcomes? Is it looking like a 51-49 vote, or could we still see some shifting here?
There could still be shifting, because just because senators are voting yes on the procedural motion doesn't mean that they have to stick with that vote when it comes to the full question of, do you confirm Pete Hegseth to the head of the DOD? There are four people who we're looking at closely here. Mercollins, we could call them that because I think we're going to be talking about them a lot.
No kidding.
But Murkowski and Collins both, of course, I think are going to stick in the no column. They've said so. But the other two names that we're watching are Tom Tillis of North Carolina and then Senator Mitch McConnell, the former top Republican, now out of that role and just a regular senator like anybody else. They've both signaled concerns about this. I'm not a mathematician, you well know this, but I can count to four. Those are four names that if all of them ultimately went with no, then this nomination would fail. But the other option here is, let's say McConnell votes no with Mercollins, as we're now terming them, and then that leaves Tillis to vote yes. That's a tie, and that's where J.D. Vance, the vice president, comes in. So there's a few different permutations on this, but by and large, large, I do think Hegseth is likely to pass here.
I'm going to combine your name now. We're going to go with Vitaly Ali. How does that work?
I love it. Perfect.
It's actually just your name, just reversed, so never mind. All
well,
right.
the rhyme kind of helps you there.
Exactly. I do like it. I might go with that. All right. Ali Vitaly, anchor of Way Too Early on MSNBC. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. Much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now. A little later, the family members of Eric and Lyle Menendez speaking out for their freedom ahead of that highly anticipated resentencing hearing now just months away. But first, after the break, America's bird flu crisis is spreading this morning as egg supplies dwindle in several states. We've got the latest on it all next. Welcome back. Couples across Thailand officially said I do yesterday during a mass wedding in honor of the legalization of same-sex marriage in that country. NBC's Janice Mackey-Frayer has more on the celebration.
Couples wore dresses, suits, or traditional Thai outfits. There were balloons, sparkles, and smiles as hundreds walked down a rainbow-colored aisle and proudly into history. Most people at this mass wedding have been in partnerships for years, but today marks the first time in Thailand that they can register their love as legal. We can live safely and smoothly without being a burden to anyone, she says. It's so good. Thailand has long been seen as open to LGBTQ plus people, but it still took activists over 2 decades to campaign for full legal rights.
It's not only protests on the street, but we also do a lot of the advocacy.
Thailand's prime minister on her Instagram account said the rainbow flag has been planted gracefully in Thailand, adding everyone's love is legally recognized with honor and dignity. For Maple, a single mom, and her partner Kevin, a transgender man, being married means more than just a piece of paper, though they've been waiting 6 years to get it.
This law is important because this will be like family, the real family.
Maple says a legal marriage gives them stability and respect, which has come reluctantly, even from their own families. So when they arrived at the mass wedding, they were beaming. They registered their documents, got marriage certificates, and with witnesses...
My big brother. Yeah, my big brother.
and photos, they were newlyweds. Thailand becomes only the 3rd place in Asia, behind Nepal and Taiwan, to allow people of the same gender to marry. The law also grants them adoption and inheritance rights. Thailand is also hoping the marriage equality law will be a boon for wedding tourism. This ceremony the first to celebrate progress and to say love wins. Janice Mackey-Frayer, NBC News, Beijing.
The fight against bird flu is intensifying, with cases popping up in birds, cows, even cats. Because of this growing outbreak, Americans are now feeling the pain in their pockets as the shrinking supply of eggs is hiking up prices at the grocery store. That's where we find NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa. She is at the Morton Williams grocery store here in New York City with a closer look at the impact from the farms to your wallet. Emily, good morning.
Hey there, Joe. Good morning to you. Well, one of the owners here tells me he has never seen the cost of eggs like this before, more than doubling over the past couple of months because of the strain on supply. And unfortunately, some of that is passed on to the consumer. You've probably noticed at grocery stores near you. Take a look at some of the prices. We've got $5.69, $12.79, $8.69, even $12.99. We're talking about more than $1 for an egg as fears grow over mounting bird flu cases across the country.
This morning, America's bird flu crisis showing no signs of slowing, with new cases just this month emerging in nearly 25 states, and for the first time in Philadelphia. Health officials there are warning people to keep an eye out for sick wild birds and stay away from them. On New York's Long Island, people in hazmat suits on the ground at Crescent Duck Farm this week following confirmed detection of H5N1 or bird flu. The family-run business forced to kill its entire flock of nearly 100,000 ducks, something the Thomases in Illinois also had to do with their nearly 3,000 hens.
It's been a roller coaster of emotions. We just know that we have no control, and we are just making the next best choice for our family and our farm.
The fallout felt at grocery stores, where shoppers are finding empty shelves and higher prices. The cost of a dozen eggs surging 65% from a year ago.
These eggs went up to $10, $9, $11. Like, what is going on in this world?
Since the outbreak started in 2022, the avian flu has impacted more than 135 million birds, and now a growing number of other species, including skunks, bears, and cats.
There have been more than 24 cases in cats since early December. How are cats contracting the bird flu?
One could be from a raw diet. One could be from if they're an indoor-outdoor cat and they're interacting with wildlife.
Health agencies now encouraging pet owners to keep cats inside. The FDA also calling for caution from pet food manufacturers, urging them to take processing steps such as heat treatment that are capable of inactivating viruses.
It is a very serious virus, and it's a very fast-acting disease.
Now, this strain of bird flu has not adapted to easily infect humans or spread among us. And the FDA points out that eggs from infected poultry actually hitting store shelves is low, the chances. But still, experts are encouraging people to properly and thoroughly cook their breakfast. Joe?
Important reminder there. Emily, thank you so much. Coming up, Brian Kohberger back in court. After the break, the back and forth over the credibility of the only surviving witness from those University of Idaho murders back in 2022. That story up next. Welcome back. The defense team for murder suspect Brian Kohberger will return to court today for day 2 of his pretrial hearings. Yesterday, his lawyers challenged key evidence in the case and argued that the surviving roommate's testimony was unreliable. NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett has the latest.
Hey there, Brian Kohberger is expected back in court today, and it could be a make-or-break moment for his defense, as the judge had some very sharp questions for his legal team, expressing skepticism that some of the strongest evidence against him would stay out of this trial.
No, I'm trying to understand the legal argument.
Brian Kohberger's legal team under heavy scrutiny, with the judge throwing cold water on the defense's effort to get the DNA evidence connecting him to the stabbings of 4 college students tossed out.
I can't find any case law that would support that idea, that somehow a warrant would be needed for DNA left at a crime scene.
The defense challenging how investigators zeroed in on Kohberger, using the DNA left on a leather knife sheath found next to one of the victims, and running it through public ancestry websites to build a list of suspects.
Runner, there was no warrant for several phases of the search.
But the judge appearing unpersuaded that the use of that investigative technique itself violated Kohberger's rights.
When there's a DNA match between the DNA and the sheath and Mr. Kohberger, isn't that probable cause every day and twice on Sunday?
Such pointed exchange is part of the high-stakes hearing now stretching into a second day, ahead of a trial for the murders of students Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Gonsalves. Kohberger's lawyers also accusing investigators of misleading the court, offering new details on a surviving roommate home at the time of the stabbings, calling her unreliable.
This witness was sure that she heard this particular victim go down the stairs, go up the stairs, and then come running back down the stairs. That is not what's contained in this affidavit. She's not sure what she heard or saw was real or whether it was at a dream.
The state pushing back.
We know it wasn't a dream because they found the evidence discovered the next morning.
All this in a courtroom closed to the public, the victims' families watching the proceedings on a live stream.
I'd rather be in the hallways of justice for my daughter than to be sitting in my room on a living room couch.
Now, the defense also seemed to cast doubt on the surveillance video in this case, and that's significant because the authorities used it to suggest that Kohberger had been scoping out the victim's home before those killings, likely another point of contention with prosecutors when this hearing picks up again today. Back to you.
All right, Laura, thank you so much. Another case captivating the nation. The Menendez brothers now preparing for a resentencing hearing that might set them free. Their family members are continuing to speak out on their behalf, urging the new district attorney to be sympathetic. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Gosk is here with the latest on Eric and Lyle's first cousin speaking out. Steph, good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning, Joe. That resentencing hearing for the Menendez brothers was supposed to take place next week, but has been postponed until March because of the LA wildfires. But that delay has not stopped the calls for their release. Among the loudest voices is Anna Maria Baralt, a cousin who tells me she speaks to both brothers every day, sometimes multiple times a day.
Eric and Lyle Menendez will now have to wait until March for a resentencing hearing and a chance for freedom they never thought they'd have.
We're in constant contact.
And are they hopeful?
I think that they are cautiously hopeful. Hope is a dangerous game when you are an inmate after 35 years.
Anna Maria Baralt is their first cousin.
We climbed a lot of trees, we played in a lot of pools, we ran around. I mean, they were full of life.
Then everything abruptly changed in 1989, the year Eric and Lyle shot their parents in the living room of their Beverly Hills home.
To have the public spectacle for decade after decade has been very difficult.
The brothers have been serving life sentences without parole for the last 35 years. Recent documentaries and a popular drama series focusing on Jose Menendez's alleged sexual abuse of them have brought renewed scrutiny to the case. The new LA district attorney telling People magazine he has not watched either, saying in part, anything that's reenacted that's not based on facts that are hardcore facts, I'm uninterested in.
So we will look at each case separately, which is the way they actually should be handled. We'll look at each victim separately.
The previous district attorney, George Gascon, had recommended the Menendez brothers be resentenced.
Didn't it seem like the new DA took a step back from where Gascon was?
It did feel like in his interviews he was saying that. However, I'm going to take him at his word when he says that he's doing the hard work and he's reviewing.
The brothers' attorneys say there is new evidence that proves they acted in self-defense. While behind bars, family members say Lyle and Eric have worked hard to improve themselves.
If you look at Lyle and Eric as people, not just a blanket life without parole sentence, I think that you are forced to confront their incredible rehabilitation.
As she and her family wait, Baralt has taken her advocacy online, starting a TikTok feed last October that has skyrocketed in popularity.
I had heard that there was this huge community of supporters. I was not prepared for the outpouring of love worldwide that was going to come my way for talking about them. It's been really beautiful.
There are three possible paths that could lead to Lyle and Eric's release. There is this resentencing hearing in March. There is a possible hearing to evaluate the new evidence the defense attorneys say they have. And finally, there is an appeal for clemency from the governor. But right now, Gavin Newsom says he's going to wait and see what this new district attorney says, Joe. And really, so much of this process and their chance for freedom rests in the hands of this new district attorney.
All right, Stephanie, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Now to an alarming arrest here in New York City. A man who ran a popular med spa is accused of operating without a license and injecting patients with counterfeit Botox. Some of those patients say they're experiencing double vision and heart palpitations. NBC News correspondent Rahima Ellis has more.
New York City esthetician Joey Grant Luther faces multiple felony charges after prosecutors say he knowingly and without a license injected clients with counterfeit Botox from China, making some of them sick. Luther's medical spa, JGL Aesthetics, flaunted luxury self-care and offered facials and body sculpting on its website. But inside, prosecutors say, the clients were offered a different menu of services on an iPad, including a category called injectables. Luther assured clients he was using products purchased from Allergan, an American company that manufactures Botox, according to officials. But according to a complaint filed in the Southern District of New York and unsealed on Wednesday, Luther was ordering counterfeit Botox from suppliers based in China and Hong Kong. Prosecutors say one patient who paid $463 for an injection was diagnosed with botulism, a rare but serious disease that attacks the nervous system and can cause paralysis. After another client messaged Luther, they went to the ER for double vision. Luther replied, "It's rare with Botox," and assured the patient the Botox was not counterfeit, the complaint says. Adding that 3 days later, Luther texted his Chinese-based supplier saying, "That lot number is contaminated that I bought from you. It's on the news here." On Monday, Luther was arrested and charged with wire fraud, smuggling, and holding counterfeit drugs for sale and for dispensing. Luther and his attorney did not respond to NBC News' request for comment.
The counterfeit products that have been used had 150 units, which is something that's not even made. So right there, you would know that it was fake.
Dr. Lance Brown is a board-certified dermatologist and clinical assistant professor of dermatology at NYU. He says the number one thing patients can do to stay safe is to check that their provider is licensed.
It's very important to make sure that you check the credentials of anybody you go see before going to get these injections.
And to seek medical care if you experience these symptoms.
Blurred or double vision, difficulty swallowing, dry mouth, keeping your head or neck up in position. These are all signs that could show that you've been injected with the counterfeit or fake product.
Our thanks to Rahema Ellis for that report. Prosecutors allege Luther continued to purchase and inject the counterfeit Botox even after he learned clients were getting sick. Luther is charged with wire fraud, smuggling, and other crimes related to the counterfeit drugs. The wire fraud charge alone carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. All right, coming up, it is pandemonium in Washington this weekend. A pair of unbearably precious pandas set to make their D.C. debut today at the National Zoo. We've got a preview of their decade-long American vacation next. We're back now with a toast. So raise your glasses, okay, maybe your coffee mugs. Instead of alcohol, though, more people are venturing into the world of mocktails. The booze-free beverage is seeing a mainstream boom, especially among younger consumers. NBC News correspondent Valerie Castro takes a look at what's driving the mocktail mania.
They're the new drinks promising you everything but a buzz.
I drink this to kind of like wind down.
It's supposed to make you feel cool, calm, and collected.
Non-alcoholic drinks surging in popularity. Some claiming to ease stress, lift your mood, and help you focus. And they're even getting a celebrity boost.
Here's to being open to life and drinking it all in.
The first time I drank him, it felt nostalgic. Euphoric.
It really helped get me through the first year of sobriety.
Consumer intelligence firm Nielsen IQ finds non-alcoholic beverage sales have grown roughly 27% year over year since 2021, while alcohol sales ticked down slightly last year. Cocktail bars across the country are seeing an increased demand for non-alcoholic options even after dry January comes to an end. Brooklyn distillery St. Agrestis launched their non-alcoholic Phony Negroni 3 years ago. It's now one of the top ready-to-drink mocktails on the market.
How is it doing compared to your traditional liquors?
It's by far the biggest seller we have, and it actually became our best seller like within 2 months of launching it.
So it's outpaced your alcoholic beverages?
By far, yeah. Now we're selling, on the St. Agrestis brand, close to 90% of our sales are actually non-alcohol.
St. Agrestis co-founder Stephen D'Angelo doesn't claim the Phony Negroni will boost your mood, but he says it does help satisfy a growing demand for health-conscious options.
There was kind of a pullback regarding alcohol towards the tail end of the pandemic. People wanted to start thinking about their health quite a bit. Overall, consumption trends, globally are just going down.
Earlier this month, the Surgeon General warning that alcohol consumption is linked to 7 types of cancer.
My brother, who was a big wine drinker, and the next day, that warning came out, he stopped drinking. It's only going to get bigger than the non-alcoholic trend.
But while many are turning to mocktails for health benefits, UCLA Health senior clinical dietitian Dr. Dana Hunnis urges people to know what they're consuming. Adding herbal supplements in some canned beverages aren't FDA regulated, and the data about their effects is limited.
I do think that it's important to not overdo something just because it sounds really healthy because it comes from a plant. There are additives that companies are using to make their products seem healthier, when in reality, that's not always the case.
The Mocktail movement also creating a new space for people to gather without the pressure to imbibe. Renowned mixologist Derek Brown traded in booze for non-alcoholic beverages nearly a decade ago.
Too often we are kind of thrust into drinking because of social conformity, peer pressure, stress, etc. And what we really need to do is step back, and Dry January does that wonderfully, and say, why are we doing this? What's our why?
Brown launched an annual alcohol-free drinking festival in Washington, D.C. 3 years ago.
Alcohol is optional, but connection is not. And so we have to really foster opportunities for that. So when we created Mindful Drinking Fest, that was at the heart of what we wanted to do.
Whether it's for health, sobriety, or socializing, it seems the mocktail movement is not just a passing trend.
People probably realize that what they like is more, hanging out, socializing, going to a bar, and it's less so about the alcohol itself and the drink.
People are trying to be healthier, more mindful of what they take in, more active. So I think, and now it's attractive. You don't have to sit there and drink, orange juice.
Our thanks to Valerie Castro. Let's get to some financial headlines. Boeing is projecting a big quarterly loss after a bruising 2024. CNBC's Silvana Henao has that and some other money news. Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning to you. Yes, so more trouble for Boeing as the struggling company warns investors to brace for steeper quarterly losses and lower sales. Now, Boeing expects to report a loss of about $4 billion in the fourth quarter as it was hit by charges in its defense business and that 7-week strike at its main factory in Washington state. Now, the loss is nearly triple the size expected by Wall Street. Boeing has lost billions of dollars since 2019 following 2 fatal crashes of its 737 MAX jet, which exposed a number of production, quality, and safety concerns. Passengers on Spirit Airlines may need to cover up on their next flight. Starting this week, the discount carrier has updated its contract of carriage, saying passengers won't be permitted to board or may be forced to leave the plane if they are barefoot, aren't wearing enough clothing, or if their clothes or a tattoo is offensive in nature. Spirit describes being inadequate clothes as see-through items or exposing certain body parts. Spirit has previously banned this passenger behavior, but is reinforcing its policies. And we're less than 2 weeks away from the Super Bowl and the halftime show headlined by Kendrick Lamar. Now, he announced yesterday SZA will join him as a special guest. Now, she's featured on the song Luther from Lamar's latest album, GNX. Kendrick Lamar's company, PG Lang, is handling the creative direction for the halftime show, while Jay-Z's Rock Nation is producing it, Joe.
SZA's year off to a good start. All right, Silvana,
yeah.
Thanks so much. There is another celebration in Washington today to cap off a busy week in the nation's capital. This one taking place a few miles from the White House at the National Zoo, where pandemonium is underway. I've said pandemonium 45 times this hour. 2 pandas are set to make their public debut to excited crowds, and senior NBC News correspondent Tom Costello joins us now from the National Zoo with more. Tom, good morning.
Hey, Joe, I've been here in Washington for 20 years. I can tell you the biggest stars in Washington are not the politicians. They're the pandas. And the new pandas have now arrived at the National Zoo. We have a live shot from the other side of the zoo where one of the pandas is already enjoying breakfast this morning. What else but some bamboo and some apples, we're told, early in the morning. Listen, they just arrived 3 months ago. They're getting acclimated to their new surroundings, their new zookeepers. They're going to be here for 10 years. But today is the day that the public finally gets to meet their new panda diplomats, their pandamats here in Washington. Washington, D.C. has been unbearably cold this week, but pandas love snow days. A little slipping and sliding, somersaults, and tree climbing. This is 3-year-old Bao Li and Qing Bao's first winter in Washington, and today marks their big public debut.
Do you want to play? Yeah, good job. There you go.
It just didn't feel like DC without giant pandas. It didn't feel like National Zoo without giant pandas.
The pair, on loan from China, arrived in October on a FedEx Panda Express. Since then, they've been getting their bearings with their new handlers in their new home.
Hi, Dolly. Nice to meet you. I've been waiting to meet you. You are such a cutie. Hello. Can you stand up and show her how tall you are? Oh my goodness, you're a big boy.
Our friend NBC Washington anchor Un Yang got to meet Bao Li, even helping to deliver his favorite foods.
Are they delicious?
Bamboo, apples, carrots, and panda bread stuffed into panda toys. Lori Thompson has been working with pandas here for 3 decades.
You have new yards, new indoor closures, new sounds, and they're living across from elephants now.
While each bear has unique coloring, they also have very different personalities.
Miss Qingyao does have a very cute birthmark on her hip. She's more just a cautious, kind of more introverted panda, and Bao Li is just full of life and very friendly. So I think he's probably going to be quite the ham.
A big personality in Washington, he's got company.
I think pandemonium is going to break out right here at the zoo.
First Lady Pat Nixon first welcomed pandas to the National Zoo in 1972, part of new panda diplomacy with China and a new global conservation program. 2 million visitors a year come to the National Zoo. Millions more tune in to the zoo's panda cams. When the last pandas returned to China in 2023, the zoo started on a big makeover for future residents. New habitats, pools, and climbing structures to keep them physically and mentally healthy.
I hope I can see them like frolicking around and having fun.
Today, despite the cold, pandemonium is back.
It's been amazing to see the kind of things that we've been able to do with pandas. They're amazing animals, and every day they're doing something adorable, and it makes coming to work every day pretty special.
Yeah, just the bare necessities here. How many puns can we come up with? We'll keep working it all day. Listen, Joe, here's the deal. They are on loan from China, right? $1 million a year is what the zoo must pay China. If they have cubs, the cubs would go back to China. But these two will not be able to breed until they're about 5 to 7 when they're sexually mature. So a few more years until that happens. But you can imagine this city, this is all the city is talking about. Forget the new resident down in the White House. This is what the city is talking about. Local news is going wall to wall with this. And so I'll be here in 10 years when the new pandas come to replace these pandas. Since I'm the chief panda correspondent.
You are.
Joe, back to you.
We know that. I wish we could all have the joy of a panda playing in the snow, because that is like the happiest I've ever seen anything in my life. All right, Tom, thank you. Appreciate it, my friend. Coming up, Oscar buzz taking center stage. After the break, we're taking a deep dive into all of this year's nominees and some of the big names who weren't on the Academy's list. Stay with us. That's up next. Back now with a closer look at this year's Oscar nominations. Emilia Perez leads the pack with an impressive 13 nods, including Best Actress for Carla Sofia Gascon, making her the first openly trans performer to get an Oscar nomination. The Brutalist and Wicked garnered the second most nominations with 10 each, but just like every other year, these nominations aren't without some controversy, like the use of AI in 2 of the films that are up for Best Picture. And sometimes the buzz isn't around who was nominated, but who was left off the list. Here to walk us through it all is our good friend Dave Karger. He is a host of Turner Classic Movies and author of the book 50 Oscar Nights, which relives some incredible Oscar moments and speeches from over the years. Good to have you with us. So normally during this time period on Fridays, we do our can't miss list, which is where we talk about all the things you need to see this weekend. I think this is perfect because now you can just go see all the Oscar nominees. Some are in the theaters. Some you can actually watch at home now, which is really cool.
I love this time of year because film fanatics like myself have been talking about these movies for months. Yeah. But I love that now the general public is like, what's a Nora?
Right, exactly.
And I was saying, I've been talking about a Nora since September, but now you're finally going to listen. And it's great because that's the wonderful thing about the Academy Awards is that it really elevates these movies that deserve to be seen. And in many cases, like The Brutalist, really need to be seen on a big screen. Okay. So I think that's a wonderful thing about the Academy Awards.
Let's talk about Best Picture. We've got 10 nominees. It is kind of a wide open field this year. Yeah. Some movies people have seen, others that people may not have heard of, like Nora. The Substance is in there, which is sort of a peculiar film, some might argue for. Yes. Talk about how this Best Picture race is shaping.
I love it. All my favorite movies are in there, and there's something for everyone. The Oscars are the great equalizer. You have Dune Part 2 and Wicked, these movies that made hundreds of millions of dollars, right alongside 2 foreign language films, Emilia Perez and I'm Still Here, which was, I think, a bit of the surprise nominee, a film from Brazil that also got nominated in Best Actress for Fernanda Torres. And then you have these as smaller movies like Anora and The Brutalist, and films that I think people really should now pay more attention to. A lot of people I'm hearing saying maybe Emilia Perez has the edge to win because it did have the 13 nominations. I think The Brutalist is the one to look out for with 10 big nominations. I could see a world in which that wins Best Picture, Director, and Actor and has like a mini sweep.
Could have a big night for it. All right, let's talk about Best Actress first of all, because Demi Moore gave that incredible speech at the Golden Globes. It does what the Oscars love, which is take someone who's been around a while but hasn't been honored in this way.
So modest.
And gives them that platform. But this is a tough category right here because you got some well-known names, some well-respected performances, and then a few people who didn't make the cut who are very well-known, right?
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing about the Best Actress this year is that instead of these A-listers like Nicole Kidman for Baby Girl and Angelina Jolie for Maria, they went with these lesser-known performers who are fantastic. You mentioned Carla Sofia Gascon, who's amazing. Also, Mikey Madison, the star of Honora, and what a breakthrough performance that she gave. I just love that. The only person of those 5 who's ever been nominated before is Cynthia Erivo for Wicked. And by the way, if she wins, she completes her EGOT.
Oh, that's right. She's on the edge of that. All right, let's talk about Best Actor, because you got Timothée Chalamet, who would be the youngest to win an acting Oscar. If he does win, Adrian Brody's won one before, but seems to be the favorite. And Ray Fiennes, is this his first Oscar nomination?
It's his third nomination.
It's his third. Okay.
Yes.
He's never won, though.
He's never won.
Okay.
It would be so... The only acting nominee this year who has won is Adrian Brody. In fact, 13 of the 20 acting nominees are first-time nominees, which I think is really interesting. Ray Fiennes has a chance for the kind of career achievement reason. I'd love to see Timothée Chalamet. By the way, Timothée Chalamet, first person to get 2 Best Actor nominations before the age of 30 since James Dean.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Adrian Brody has the edge.
Yeah, Chalamet will be hosting Saturday Night Live this weekend and is also the musical guest.
Can't wait.
Maybe he'll be doing a little Bob Dylan in that as well. We've got about 45 seconds left here. Let's talk about director. That's always a controversial category. There's always going to be people who get snubbed. Some people maybe thought Wicked should have gotten a nomination here.
For sure.
Break this one down for us.
Yeah, I think they went a little bit more arty. And that's why you're not seeing John Chu for Wicked or Denis Villeneuve. And I know that Josh Brolin put on Instagram, he was like, how could they not nominate Denis Villeneuve? They also didn't nominate him when Dune got 10 nominations, the first one a couple of years ago. So unless there's going to be 10 nominees for Best Director, there's always going to be some people that miss out.
All right, so much to watch. Hopefully you can check some of it out this weekend or ahead of the Oscars coming up right now in early March. Dave Karger, always good to see you. Oscars are going to air Sunday, March 2nd. First time ever. The ceremony is also going to stream live on Hulu. That does it for this hour of Morning News Now, but stick with us. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.